I'm Josh Allen, and welcome to the Baked In podcast, where I sit down with industry innovators to uncover the unique ideas and values that are baked into their businesses and have led to extraordinary success. This podcast is presented by Busey Bank. Busey has been built on that foundation of strength and service, delivering expert advice and tailored solutions for businesses and individuals for over 155 years. They also have a strong commitment to community and the environment via lending. Since 2021, they've provided over $25 million in green financing, including energy efficiency improvements, historic preservation, and commercial social development. You can learn more about their impact at busey.com. On this week's episode, I'm sitting down with Chris Eckert of Eckerts Farms. Chris is the president and CEO of Eckerts Country Store and Farms in Belleville, Illinois. He's a seventh-generation farmer overseeing a vast operation that includes fruit and vegetable crops, a farm market, restaurant, garden center, and the country's largest pick-your-own business. Chris holds a degree in agricultural economics and has experience working in the produce industry outside of the family business. We talk about leading a multi-generational enterprise, lessons learned from Mother Nature, and continuing to expand the entertainment aspect of their business. Great lessons in this one. Let's roll. So you've got a vast operation, right? You got four farms, 3 in Illinois, 1 in Kentucky, if I read that correctly. Lots of going on, the market, wholesale business, all kinds of stuff. Where do you find your energy being drawn to currently?
I think my personal passions are, number one, the farm, raising crops, dealing in agriculture, and second would be just visioning where we need to go as we evolve forward in our business. But on a daily basis, the farm is ever present and demanding and consumes most of my kind of thinking time.
Do you guys consider, I know you're farmers. I don't mean to say that, but I think I read that like in 2008, when you pushed a lot of the chips into the center of the table with the big expansion in Belleville, that you had to start looking at yourselves in the entertainment business more than in the farming business. When you look at it now, 14 years, what is it, almost 16 years after that, like, are you still in the entertainment business? Are you farmers? Who are the Eckerts?
I would say that we are farmers that have to be in the entertainment business to survive.
Begrudgingly?
Well, I wouldn't call it like outside of our wheelhouse, but it is the necessity to survive in what we do agriculturally, just because the cost of doing business is so high that without the existence of retail and entertainment in our business, we would not be able to afford the farming that we do in Illinois and Kentucky. Now, to say that, we're not new in that business either. We started in direct market retail back in the early 1900s. My great-grandfather built our first roadside market in 1910. So it's not a new thing to us, and I come from a long line of entrepreneurial thinking family members who've evolved the business over that time frame. So, but at the center of it, it has always been a production agricultural farm. And
that's I'm just trying to think how to frame the question. You have the largest pick your own operation in the country, which is something that I think that not a lot of folks are into and get involved in. Where did that grow out of, and how did that become part of what you guys are doing?
The pick your own aspect of the business started in 1963. So again, not new, but it was kind of innovative at the time. And the goal was the same as our goals that we talk about today, is just trying to figure out ways to take our crops that we grow more directly to the consumer and get a higher margin for those crops. And I think kind of woven into that is an understanding of what people value, what our guests value in what we do. We grow apples, let's say. Well, apples are apples. In a lot of ways, they're a commoditized product. And the value is not necessarily a better tasting apple, the value for our guest is coming and see how an apple grows, spending a few hours in nature, taking a wagon ride, getting away from the hustle and bustle, getting my kid off of their iPhone. Those are the things that we're finding our guests value, and it's how our challenge is, how do we provide that product in a farm environment and monetize it in a way that we can stay in business.
So what are the biggest challenges with Pick Your Own? I mean, I can imagine inviting folks onto the land and just sort of, I mean, we're in the cafe business, dealing with the retail consumer can be challenging at times, but, not a lot of folks are doing it. It seems like in the day of labor challenges and shortages, I think I read a quote that you said something to the effect that I can't find anybody to pick my fruits and vegetables, and now I've got people that are paying me to pick my fruits and vegetables. So obviously there's an advantage from a modeling standpoint, but there's got to be challenges. What are the hardest parts about operating the Pick Your Own part of the business?
Anytime we bring guests to the farm, there's a lot of liability risk because it's a working farm and you have limbs, ruts, ditches, equipment. So the risk of injury is pretty real for us, and we currently, as a business owner, you might be able to relate to, the insurance industry is a little tough right now. So rates are going up and up and up. And so our liability insurance is one of our biggest challenges with the Pick Your Own business. In terms of having people on our farm, we've just grown to expect a certain amount of waste. So if I think about an apple orchard, we don't provide ladders for our guests to pick off of because of the risk of injury. But so they're only going to be able to reach maybe half of the apples on the tree, and of that half that they have access to, they're going to knock about 50% of those on the ground. So
and once they knock on the ground, they don't pick it up.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain amount of waste that we are going to just endure because of that experience, and that's okay because one, we get a premium price for the product. I mean, it's the price of Pick Your Own apples is about the same as what you pay in the store, but we charge a field admission to go out to the orchard, and that field admission is to recover some of that loss plus the cost of getting people to the orchard. Sure. and all of the other things that go into it, but
and no distribution expense and no marketing expense. I mean, there's marketing expense in that, but from the typical wholesale distribution model,
right,
a lot taken out if folks can come to the field.
Right. So it ends up the math for a Pick Your Own farm is much better than for a wholesale operation. But we don't get the economies of scale that a large orchard would get in New York or Michigan or Washington State, where they're growing thousands of acres of trees and have mechanization and other efficiencies that we can't enjoy here in this environment, as well as the environment. The climate is not as conducive for producing apples and peaches here as it is in some other parts of the country.
So you're up against some big marketing dollars, right? From these, or I don't know what the organization would be, but the Washington apple growers, I would imagine, the Georgia peach folks. How do you find yourself competing in you mentioned apples are a commodity, right? So it's more than just flavor and taste. Like what is the point of difference purely locality and sustainability, which I know has been a big part of what you guys have done long before it was buzzwords in the industry, or how do you find yourself competing in there, especially when you look at it from the wholesale perspective, selling into Schnucks or Deerbergs locally or something like that?
Two very different things. When it comes to guests coming to Eckerts to pick and spend a day on the farm, it's really about an experience. So that in that environment, we need to think more like the zoo or the Magic House. That's our competition in that regard. So what can you do when you come to Eckerts? Do we have multiple things to spend your day doing? Do we have fun entertainment? Do we have good food? Do we have drinks? Do we have things that you're going to enjoy? And I feel more and more today we're really just an Instagram backdrop, so you come out and take your picture, post it, and you're looking like you're having a great day with your kids on the farm, and we get to provide that experience for you. So when you think about the wholesale environment, it's a much different market because, and Schnucks has been a fantastic partner for us for many, many years. And we are their local farm face for peaches and more so apples as we're moving forward. But that is more about connecting people to a local grower that they feel good about. So their customer comes in, it is feeling good that, I know where this fruit was produced. I know the family that produced it, so I'm going to feel good about buying this peach or apple because I have that kind of that confidence in the product as a result. So that's how we differentiate our product from the commodities of other apples that are coming in from growers that a consumer would have no connection to, and it gives them confidence in the product.
So let's go down the path a little bit of the wholesale thing. So, obviously you mentioned people can't pick the apples as high as they are. I'm assuming that peaches are the same way. What percentage of the fruit that you guys are growing goes through the pick your own versus out into the wholesale distribution channel?
Yeah, two different crops and two very different stories. Peaches are quite a bit different than apples. I do feel peaches as a product, we can produce something that is differentiated in the marketplace. My saying is the best peach is a fresh peach. The further you get it away from the tree, the worse it's going to taste. And we have a huge competitive advantage compared to California or to South Carolina, Georgia, because they got to be on a truck for a couple days to get into this market. So we're going to be fresher as a result. Therefore, when you go to Schnucks and buy an Eckerts peach, generally speaking, we're going to taste a lot better than anything you buy from anywhere else because of that competitive advantage. So as a result, we've been able to be more aggressive and competitive in the wholesale business with peaches. Apples, different story. More commoditized. There's not as much of a quality differentiator when it comes to distance from the tree with apples.
Age doesn't have as much of an impact on an apple.
Apples just hold up a lot better in storage and sometimes even taste better after they've been in refrigeration for a month or two. So the apples we're buying today in Schnucks or Dierberg's or Whole Foods, most of them were harvested last September and October and kept in cold storage. And they still taste pretty good. They're not as good as the fresh crop, market apples, but it's not like a peach. When you get to 3 weeks, a peach is done. It is not going. It's like a ticking time bomb.
And what about picking early? How negatively detrimental is that to a peach to take it early so it doesn't bruise, to get it on the to kind of handle that distribution piece?
Yeah. So peaches will only generate sugar when they're connected to the tree. So once that peach is harvested, it's not going to get any sweeter. It'll soften, and as it softens, it'll break down some of the acids inside the peach, and it will, as a result, taste sweeter. But the best tasting peach is one that's got high sugar and high acid. So the longer you leave it on the tree, the better overall eating experience you're going to have. Again, since we don't have such a transportation burden on us to get to market, we can harvest a little riper than California or South Carolina and deliver a little bit better eating experience that way as well.
So given the competitive advantage, is that your number one crop?
Peaches are by far the biggest crop we grow. We grow about 300 acres of peaches.
Is that both in volume and in dollars?
That's the downside is about 75-80% of the peaches we grow are for the wholesale market. So that's going to be a lower dollar value crop than apples, which are grown primarily for sale in our stores or pick your own, which is going to drive more revenue into our business. So
give me a duration. I mean, the peach season feels like it would be shorter. I don't know enough about it to know. Is they all about the same seasonality?
We actually pick peaches over more days than we pick apples.
You do?
So
okay.
The difference is that we started picking peaches last week, and we'll pick until the end of August. So it's really 2.5 to 3 month harvest window. Apples will start late August and be done by the end of October. So it's maybe a week or 2 or 3 shorter than peach harvest. But because apples are more durable, we'll be selling Eckerts apples until May of next year because they hold up in storage.
Okay.
And peaches, within a week of being done harvesting, they're gone. So you just have to wait longer for a fresh peach.
And I know you guys have gotten into the cider business and some other things. Do apples have more peripheral opportunity for the waste, for the extra product, for sort of the whatever kind of comes of the non-apple selling aspect of it?
So cider has become a big component of our business, both sweet apple cider and now we're venturing into hard ciders. But we also do a strawberry cider and we do a peach cider. The caveat to that is when you make strawberry cider, it's 40%, 30% strawberries and 60 or 70% apples because they're not sweet enough. It'd just be very astringent without the apple juice to sweeten it up. Peaches are about 60% peach and 40% apple. So we're constantly using apples to make those ciders as well. And a lot of those apples we harvested last year, kept in our cold storage, and we're going to use those this spring and summer to make those other juices.
And the cider business, I know, was that in 21, 22 that you added the cider shed?
Yeah,
in Belleville, you kind of leaned in a little more heavily into that business?
We've been in the sweet cider business forever. We started the hard cider business in 2021, and we started with a partnership with Brick River here in St. Louis, where we were bringing them juice, and Russ he created 4 proprietary blends for us and private labeled Eckerts hard ciders, and then in 2022 we built the cider shed, which is our hard cider tasting room and outside concert venue. That opened up 2 years ago, and that now in 24 we've gotten our winery license and we're starting to produce our own lines of hard cider as well. We're still partnered with Russ here at Brick River, and he's producing for us as well. But now we can infill some specialty hard ciders that we're doing ourselves as well.
Okay. I mean, and I'm assuming alcohol is just another expansion of the entertainment aspect of the concept to get folks, maybe some younger folks who are kind of pre-family, or just to kind of expand the reach of the farm.
Yeah, we see our consumer is changing. You know, for years we talked about our target audience being soccer moms, bringing the kids out to the farm for a day on the weekend to have that experience. Still far and away our target audience. But we also see a lot of young couples without kids coming to the farm, whether it's a date or maybe they're married. They all have puppies. So they come out to the farm and they're enjoying what we have to offer, but they're looking for something different. They don't value the petting zoo and the playground. They want a different offering. So the hard cider bar has been a real hit with that audience and with the empty nest audience. So it's kind of what fit 2 ends of that kind of previous target demographic that we were missing, and we think is a growing opportunity for us. You know, young adults are getting married later, having fewer kids, and they're looking for a little bit different entertainment option than what we were offering 20 years ago.
Well, let's take a little bit of a step back. I think maybe get out of the weeds, pun intended, right? I mean, you're 7th generation?
Correct.
Is that right? 7th generation at the farm. How do you, and you took over from your dad, so your dad was president and CEO, and that's what your role is now at the farm. How do you create a voice in a 7th generation organization? I mean, I grew up in a family business. My family's business, when they sold, was 100 years old, and it's something that I talk to my dad about a lot. Like, how do you create your own lane and your own pathway? How have you navigated that? You know, holding true to tradition, holding true to who Eckerts is, and at the same time trying to forge innovation and a future and kind of looking ahead.
Yeah, you know, Family business is a weird thing, and we're very fortunate that we've had the success we've had in holding together. I would say that it's much harder to hold a family business together than make a family business profitable. And
that's interesting.
A lot of times you do the latter at the expense of the former. So, you're going to sacrifice profit to hold the business together, and a lot of times. I think part of being in an agricultural environment is grounding in a lot of ways. It is humbling. There's a lot of things outside of your control, so it really says the business is not about you. It's a lot about a lot of things that are outside of your control. So just relax and see if you can make it. And I think that really fits hand in glove with a family business. So if you look at like a lot of farm families, they're old multi-generation operations, because I think farming and agriculture teaches you lessons about staying the course, looking at the long road, not short-term returns, and not being so arrogant about what you do. That being said, I knew from a very young age that being president of Eckerts really doesn't mean anything because I have two sisters, my wife, and my friend from high school working in the leadership team. It's like they don't really listen to directives from me. It's a very collaborative effort, and I think we're smarter as a result. Right, the decisions sometimes take a little longer, but I think they are more informed. They're more aired out, and they have a broader perspective when you finally do launch something.
And you guys have dealt with your share of adversity. I mean, I think in just kind of looking back over the last 10 or 12 years, I mean, you had a couple of droughts, you had a polar vortex. I mean, you've had some, like, to your point, things that are out of your control that you guys have really had to weather the storm.
Right.
Again, I guess, pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, Mother Nature is ultimately the dictator in our business. It's like you can be the best business manager you could possibly be and have the most efficient farming operation, and that will have no impact on whether you're going to be profitable or not. Because you
does crop insurance exist? I mean, are there things that you can insure against with weather? Or, I mean, I don't know enough about the industry to sort of know how it works.
There is crop insurance, and it's works through private and public kind of sourcing. So it's private insurance that's subsidized through the USDA, but it's not something that you grow crops to collect insurance.
Sure.
Its intention is to keep you from having to liquidate the farm if you lose a crop. And so as a result, it's very effective in that result. Without crop insurance, it really would not be financially feasible to raise peaches to the extent that we raise them here, just because you're going to lose on average 1 out of 7 crops in peaches.
I imagine strawberries are just as fragile.
No, strawberries actually are a little more resilient, and there is not
Really?
crop insurance on strawberries. Peaches and apples are the only 2 crops that we can get crop insurance on. And that's because there has to be enough production history and enough production acreage that says, okay, this is a sustainable area of the country to grow these crops, so we will insure it. If you're just trying to grow peaches in Minnesota, well, they're not going to insure that because it doesn't make any sense to try to grow a crop in an environment that doesn't really allow it. So, but strawberries, there's not enough acreage of strawberries grown in Illinois to justify crop insurance on.
Okay.
But it is a really good crop for pick your own for us, albeit 10 acres of strawberries is not a big crop compared to 300 acres of peaches or 150 acres of apples. So it's a nice fit. But anyway, Mother Nature is the ultimate. Ruler.
And you mentioned the family involvement. So, but there's some other structural things that I thought were interesting in some of the stuff. So you have an outside advisory board that you all have put together, or a board of directors for the organization?
We do. There is an official board of directors, and then there's an advisory board of directors, which is for non-family, business involved participants that we meet quarterly with. That's been a really effective way to...
When did that start?
It started quite a long time ago. I'm going to say there was an advisory board of sorts before I got involved in the business, and then my dad and his generation, once myself and sister came into the business, they kind of revamped that a little bit, and then more recently, our generation kind of revamped it again and brought in some people that we had connections with. But it is a way for us to get outside perspective, but also, again, family business. The biggest enemy is emotion, and it's a way for us to kind of reduce some of the emotional decision making and make it more, bring a third party in that says, well, let's look at this from a business perspective, not such an emotional perspective.
So how have you found the most effective use for them? So do you make capital investment decisions with that group? So you'll make a presentation quarterly to that group and sort of say, here's what we're thinking about, these are the thoughts, get some feedback, or are you touching base with them on a regular basis outside of those quarterly meetings? Like, how does the group really benefit you?
Yes to all. Okay. So all of our advisors are more than willing to answer a phone call from me at any point in time between meetings and answer questions or sit down, have a cup of coffee, review something. But we could use the example of when we did the cider shed expansion as kind of a case study. In that regard, that's a multi-year decision because that was multi-million-dollar investment for us. It really started in 2018 when we had kind of completed our store expansion. We had purchased the farm in Kentucky, which was the next kind of major capital project we did. And we didn't really know what was next on the docket. And what we were seeing is like, well, we've got more and more people coming to the farm, but they're picking fewer and fewer apples. So we've got an overproduction of apples out here. What are we going to do about that? And so that conversation comes up at our quarterly board meetings. And it's like, well, you got to go see what other farms are doing. So we took some trips around the country in 2018 and 19, kind of studying the market, and came back and said, well, we can take out trees, the wholesale market is possible with local apples. We're seeing people have success with that. Hard cider is an option, and we're seeing a lot of people with excitement on that. And so they look, well, there's three things right there. Let's maybe focus on trying to get more efficient with the crop we have and wholesale that. Let's make that the first investment. So we retooled our warehouse and our packing line so we could pack apples. We put in a new cider press and sweet cider operation. And so that was kind of year one in 2020. Of course, then COVID happened and things got a little weird. And then 2021 came along and they said, well, instead of us spending a bunch of money on hard cider, why don't we see if we can find a partner and let's tiptoe into this instead of jumping in with a lot of capital. And so we partnered up with Brick River and we introduced that. And then along the way, they're like, okay, well, if we want to do this hard cider bar, what does that look like? So we engage with an architect and we start developing plans, and we're reviewing those plans with the board. And then let's do a net present value analysis of that. What revenue do we have to hit to justify this investment? What's the cost of capital to do this kind of investment? And so we do all that analysis, and it takes until 2020, the end of 2021, and some good operating years in between to say, okay, now we're in a position that we feel comfortable doing this sort of capital investment, and we decide as a group to move forward. But it's more of an evolution of 100 decisions, not this major decision, this is what we're going to do, yes or no.
Right. No, but it takes a tremendous amount of humility, I think, for a family to be willing to bring in an outside advisory board. I think that's the biggest challenge, right? I mean, it's a family business, can be so insulated, which is positive and negative. And so I think to be able to lean on that group and have that outside group and recognize the value is super important. What's the difference for you all between the official board of directors then and the advisory board, and how do you use them differently?
I think that the biggest difference is that advisors do not vote on actual capital projects. They're not going to be liable for any type of financial decision that the company makes. So the board of directors, the official board of directors, votes on those decisions. But
now, is that just family?
No.
There's outside on the...
There's our CFO is a board member. Okay. Also, he's a non-family member. But the other than that, the rest of the board is all family members. But I would say the advisors are in those meetings when we're making those decisions. They just don't vote on those decisions.
So you mentioned that the cider shed and I guess the donut shop was sort of part of that. The cider donut shop was the last big thing. What's next as you guys look ahead? I mean, you don't strike me as a guy who's not constantly trying to figure out what's next. Obviously,
right.
As you look to pass this on to additional generations, you got to start thinking about the future.
Right.
What have you guys identified, or what path are you starting to go down in terms of what could be next?
It's a great question. I mean, we're in the midst of that right now, and what's interesting to me is, as you know, I'm 52 years old, and you've been through a couple of these major capital projects, and we understand what that takes and kind of the burden that you go through after making those decisions and building it up and weathering it a little bit. So you start to ask questions like, well, do I want to do that again? Or do I ride this out a little bit? And I think there's also a real question in our mind about transitioning the business to another generation. We've got the 8th generation starting to come back into the business. The bigger and more...
You've got 2 kids. You mentioned 20 and 17, so yep. They're knocking on the doorstep of that potential opportunity.
And right now, my niece and nephew are back in the business full time. My sisters are older, so my oldest sister's 2 of her children are back in the business. But it's like the bigger the business becomes, the more complex the business becomes, the more challenging succession becomes from a management perspective. And I think we're asking questions like, well, maybe we need to see how many players there are in this next team that want to take this on. We don't want to make it so complicated that they, can't handle it, or maybe they don't want that big of a business. So we really need to start engaging them in that decision-making process and make sure they're passionate about it. Or do we need to be bringing in non-family management, to start helping with that leadership role, which we have some non-family leadership in the business already. But I think there's the new challenge that I face is thinking about this more as the older generation than the younger generation perspective. And that's new for me. And I enjoy that. That's kind of fun and exciting to learn new things. But in saying that, we're also looking at what is the most logical play for us as we go forward. And we are committed to our location in Belleville. We've been there since the 1870s. We want to be there for long term to come. And in order to do that, we have to continually evolve and reinvent ourselves and be relevant to a young customer and an evolving customer. So we're looking at that, and it really involves more investment entertainment. We want to build a bigger mousetrap, let's say.
So scaling up Belleville makes more sense than additional locations or additional farms? I mean, obviously the operational complexity of another location is a lot. I'm not belittling that at all. So, yeah. I mean, certainly leaning more heavily into a greater Disneyland experience.
You're hitting the nail on the head, and exactly the conversation that we're having is okay, if you look at the St. Louis Metro as a market, well, we're on the far eastern edge of that. The growth is on the far western edge of St. Louis. So does it make more sense to, open up a location in Wright City, Missouri, and be on the west edge of that growing market? But that's not an inexpensive move to make, and it replicates a lot of our efforts that are in place in Belleville. So I think, in looking at that, we're having that conversation right now. And I think we're probably leaning more towards building out Belleville more aggressively than or duplicating on the west side of St. Louis. I think if we were looking at expansion in locations, we'd be looking at other markets. We've had success in Lexington, Kentucky. We see Nashville as a wide open market, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Chicago, Indianapolis, anywhere within 300 miles of our distribution center.
For a pick your own kind of experience?
Yeah, what we do basically in Belleville. But and that's what we do in Lexington, Kentucky. It's a pick your own retail entertainment option. But we like that. I kind of lean more towards that because it diversifies us from a weather perspective. So if it's raining in St. Louis, it might not be raining in Nashville on a Saturday in October, which is critically important to our profitability.
Sure.
It's not just growing things, it's also selling things where Mother Nature can be a problem.
Right.
So we can diversify that risk or hedge that risk a little bit by being geographically dispersed some.
The other thing that we started to talk about, and I just want to go back to it for a second, because as you think about the 8th generation, I think you guys have some interesting sort of rules, axioms, I'm not sure what term we're going to use, in place for how your family can come back into the business. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned for somebody like myself with kids that are of an age that could potentially consider it. But how do you guys view the entryway back into Eckerts for the next generation?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and not to say that we've got it figured out, but there's kind of two parts of that in our family. One is when members of the family are high school, college age, we want them to have experience working in the farm in summers. So our kids, my nieces and nephews, and the broader family, we have family members that live in California and Texas and Florida. We want those kids to come and spend a few weeks in the summer working on the farm just to get that connection and see what it's about. And over the generations, everybody that's done that has really cherished that experience. And it's like created value to them and pride and ownership, because those family members get shares of stock handed down through inheritance over the years, and they feel good about that. They want to be an owner of the business when they get that stock. And then we also do family reunions. We've tried to do more of this in recent years to get those families back to the farm once every few years and just experience it, talk about it, let them be a part of the conversation on where the farm's going, where the business is going. And how many people, just out of curiosity, how many people is that? Like, what is that? When you guys have a family reunion, what does that look like? It's not as big as you might think, but so we're doing a family reunion this 4th of July, and it's about 40 to 50 people in total. But this year's family reunion is targeted Gen 8. Like all of those kids that are kind of in high school, college, and just out of college, we're giving them assessments on what their leadership skills are, and they're going to get kind of a feedback on what they might be thinking about for a career. And then we're going to talk about what careers are available at Eckerts, and if they want to be a part of it, how they could get engaged with it.
If I asked them, would they feel pressure to come into the business? Would they feel excitement? Like, what is the general sense of the 8th generation?
Culturally, I would say that my family has never created a culture of pressure to get involved in this business. It's a tough business, and it's not like wildly profitable. It's not we're all driving Lamborghinis around and trying to figure out where to hide the money. So you got to work pretty hard, and you got to really have a passion for it. And the older generations understood that, and always my father and mother said, "Look, if you want to be in this business, you got to really know you want to be in it. So you need to go out and experience other things before you commit to this." So that's kind of the second phase, which is the rule is you have to go get your college education and work at least 2 to 3 years outside of the family business before being considered for a management role or a full-time position in the business. And so we've kind of, we've never broken that rule. And I think it's been really good. One, because it makes people, sure they want to do this. And two, whenever we bring people back into the business, they bring some really good perspective and experience with them.
Because you went in the grocery business, I think, somewhere, and the wholesale distribution business? Or
Yeah, I was in Boston for a while, worked for a grocery store chain, kind of like Schnucks, as a buyer. And then I was in Columbus, Ohio. I got married, and my wife was going to Ohio State for graduate school. And so I worked in a salad processing plant. So, I saw very different aspects of the produce world, but then came back into the business when there was an opening. I was asked to come back into the business. So, but it again, not to say that is a perfect scenario for success, but it's something that I feel was really important to my success, that experience.
Well, I think we talked about it. I mean, the insular nature of family business, like in order to get outside leadership skills, in order to just see how other folks run other businesses, has tremendous value. Because as well run as your organization can be, it's still an eighth generation, a 7th generation business. There's some stuff that just passes down. And I think in order to bring that fresh perspective and innovation and something new and continue that drive for entrepreneurship, you just have to see how other things do things. And even if you're seeing how people do things poorly, it still has a lot of value.
Oh, yeah. All those are very valuable learning experiences. And once you're in, you're in. It's not like you come and go in the family business. It's like, I started when I was 26 years old or something, and I'm going to be here for a long time. So that experience is very valuable when you're young.
So tell me, it's obviously it's every day. It's the farming business. So how do you relax and recharge? How do you get away from that? You guys live on the farm, I think, right?
Yep.
So how do you find some separation from the business for yourself personally?
It's a really challenging thing. Living in the middle of the farm, you're constantly seeing it, and we're the first phone call if something is awry, because we are right there. So I think the challenge and my wife and I both work in the business. My wife, Angie, runs all of our retail operations at Eckerts. So she's as invested as I am and spends as much time at work as I do. And sometimes our schedules are a little bit different because I tend to be able to get off on Sundays a little more easily. Her schedule's a little more, I can get off on weekdays a little easier because retail for us is heavily weighted on the weekends. So, I think for us, it's really about creating an oasis in our home and just being able to feel comfortable eating dinner together and getting away from it a little bit. And then we do like to take a lot of staycation trips here in St. Louis. So we'll spend a night in St. Louis just to get away from the farm for a night and unplug for a little bit. But I recognize that we are quite fortunate to have the vista that we have living in the middle of a fruit orchard in Southern Illinois. There's not too many people that get to enjoy that, and I don't take that lightly. But it is nice to get away and not think about it for every once in a while too.
Well, yeah, you have to, right?
Yeah.
And you got to give your kids that perspective outside of it too, so that they don't get so intimidated that if I'm going to come into this business, I'm going to be stuck. So.
Yeah, sometimes there might be a little too much honesty around the dinner table about the frustrations of work.
Sure.
So I'm afraid I scared them away a little. But they're working in the business now. They're in high school and college, so they spend their summers working on the farm and in the business. So it's been good. I enjoyed that.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you and to just hear a little bit about what you guys are doing. And I know we're, right in the beginning of June here, so it's a busy time for you heading into the summer. We got beautiful weather in St. Louis, so I'm sure folks are getting out to the farm. But thanks for taking a few minutes to share your experience, and continued good luck. And whatever comes next, I'm sure you guys will knock it out of the park.
Well, thank you so much. Enjoyed sitting down with you for a few minutes.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for joining me today. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing these insights from folks I truly admire. Be sure and follow the show in your favorite podcast player to be alerted to newly released episodes. And share a comment if you have any feedback or future contributor recommendations.